Hey guys, tonight we slip into a stone chamber you can't quite place, somewhere old, breathing with smoke and candlelight. The walls sweat with heat, even though it's winter beyond them. You're standing just outside the throne room, where something that feels like a celebration is unfolding, but your stomach knots. Something's off. Maybe it's the silence between claps, the way the guard's eyes drift too long across the floor, or the bitter scent of oil masked poorly by flowers. You've stepped into a coronation gold robes, brass instruments, veils of incense hanging like spider webs in the stale air. The year is 1476, the place is Savoy, and the woman you rehear for Queen Charlotte is smiling like she doesn't to see the flame in her future. You weren't supposed to be in this part of the palace. At least, not yet. Not until the robes were pressed, the throne dusted, the loyalists bribed, and enemies conveniently distracted. But somehow, perhaps by marriage, perhaps by mercy, Charlotte of Savoy is crowned anyway. She's too young for certainty, too soft-voiced for politics, and far too trusting for what waits behind her crown. Still, she kneels. The circle of nobles surrounding her is wide enough to echo, and when the golden circlet touches her forehead, you swear the flames in the sconces tremble. They say Charlotte had no claim of her own. She came into the line by widowhood, not blood. Her husband, the old duke, died quickly, quietly, and alone, which was never how powerful men passed unless someone wanted them gone. Charlotte wept, publicly, sincerely, and that may have been her first mistake, because what follows is not an embrace of her new power. It's a measured, drawn-out performance of false loyalty. One noble kneels and kisses her hand too slowly. Another calls her lady instead of queen. A chamberlain forgets to announce her properly not once, but twice. Tiny fractures, each one. You wouldn't notice them if you weren't watching closely. But you are. You're standing there now, half in shadow, and you can feel the temperature shift from warmth to warning. A documented fact, in late 15th century Savoy, coronations could be annulled retroactively. It didn't matter if the crown touched her head. What mattered was who stood behind you while it did. And Charlotte? She stood alone. They let her sit the throne for one night. Just one. Her robes shimmered like sunlight over chainmail, and her voice wavered beautifully through the feast that followed. Guests toasted. A bard played something sweet. But the applause was thin, the kind given out of duty, not devotion. Here's where it begins to turn. Midway through the feast, one servant young, shaking drops a cup near her chair. Red wine spills toward Charlotte's feet like a warning omen. Everyone freezes. She bends to help him, and in that instant, 4 hands move at once. 2 draw blades just an inch from their belts. 2 signal to the guards. But nothing happens. Not yet. The cup is cleaned, the servant dismissed, and the music resumes. But you saw it. You felt it. That was the first rehearsal of her execution. Historians still argue whether Charlotte knew her fate that night. Some claim she tried to flee the palace before dawn. Others insist she stayed willingly, even after hearing the rumors. The truth is lost between candle flickers. But here's the obscure thread one almost no one remembers. At the feast, she gave a single final toast, not to herself, not to her lineage, but to the light. To the flame, she said, which warms and reveals and, if needed, consumes. Was that defiance? A cry for mercy? Or prophecy? You'll never know, because minutes later, the hall emptied. She was escorted to her private quarters by 6 guards instead of 2. Her crown was taken for safekeeping, and in her chamber, she was told not to lock the door, that it would not be necessary. You step forward now, just past the frame of the chamber door, and find her pacing. Her veil is off, her hair unbound. No mirrors remain. Only one candle burns in the far corner. The wax drips like time counting down. She doesn't see you. Not really. She looks through you, past you. Her eyes are dry. The firelight casts her crown's shadow on the wall, though the crown itself is gone. But shadows remember, and they do not lie. You remain still as Charlotte steps lightly across the cold stone floor, her silken slippers whispering like secrets. She hasn't slept, not really. Her body moves through the motions of rest, sitting, reclining, rising, but the mind behind her eyes flickers constantly. Like a candle caught in a draught, it bends toward something just outside your reach. Fear? No, not yet. Something older, something lonelier. The guards haven't left. Two wait at the door, arms crossed, faces like sealed tombs. Their silence doesn't soothe, it closes in. You wonder if they're protecting her or containing her. Word spreads quickly in places like this, even without voices. Servants bow lower than usual, but never meet her eyes. Courtiers disappear behind curtains. At breakfast, the bread arrives burned. The tea is cold. These aren't mistakes, they're messages. She's not welcome here anymore. Charlotte, however, pretends not to notice. She speaks kindly, even brightly, thanking those who bring her things. She walks the hall with poise, nodding to portraits as if they're loyal companions. This isn't foolishness. It's dignity under siege. That morning, a letter is slipped beneath her chamber door. No seal, no signature. Just 6 words, written in a trembling hand. Leave by night. A planned fire. You don't know who wrote it. She doesn't either. But she reads it twice, folds it calmly, and places it into the fire. You watch the flames eat the ink. That night, she's summoned to the royal table. It's not a formal feast this time. No trumpets, no guests. Just 9 people. 3 judges, 4 nobles, 1 bishop, and her. The 9th seat, at the head of the table, remains empty. Symbolically so. A reminder that the real power no longer needs to be present in the room. It simply casts its shadow. She enters wearing her ceremonial red, a color of life in most courts, but in Savoy, also the color used to mark those condemned. Whether this is a coincidence or prelude, no one says. They just nod. The meal begins. They speak to her politely. The bishop even compliments her posture. One noble tells a gentle story about her late husband's riding style, as if that soft detail could hide the weight of what's coming. Every word at that table is dressed in silk, gentle, elegant, concealing the blade underneath. Then the questioning begins. They don't call it an inquiry, nor a trial. No accusations are made aloud. But each question is sharp. Have you spoken with any foreign ambassadors recently? Do you still consider yourself queen or merely regent? Have you been visited by anyone unapproved? To an outsider, it might sound like harmless court chatter, but you feel the tension rising in the pauses between her answers. Each response she gives is measured, loyal, obedient, and yet not enough. Here's the documented fact. In 1476, the Council of Savoy revised a portion of its royal charter allowing a queen dowager to be relieved of her duty should her presence threaten the stability of the state. The language was vague, on purpose. By the second course, the candles flicker lower. The room grows darker, not because time has passed, but because someone has closed the shutters. Deliberately. You hear them latch shut behind the velvet curtains. The fire in the hearth hisses. Wax pools. She keeps eating, slowly, gracefully, but her hand trembles once, just once, when she lifts the goblet, and the bishop sees it. His gaze drops to the table. You notice something odd then. She is not being accused. She is being remembered. Everything they say now circles back to her past. Do you recall the wedding vow you made in this very hall? Was it not your hand that blessed the orphanage on the eastern hill? You wore that same necklace, didn't you, when your husband died? It's a eulogy before the fire. Obscure detail here. Charlotte's necklace was said to contain a relic, a single ash fleck from a saint martyred centuries before. It was a wedding gift, She's still wearing it tonight. And still, she does not cry. Historians still argue whether she expected to be burned alive. Some point to court letters mentioning poison or exile. Others claim it was political theater meant only to scare her into voluntary abdication. But if that is true, if it was only meant to frighten her, then someone changed the script at the last minute. Because after dessert, the bishop stands. He doesn't read a decree. He simply walks behind her and places one hand on her shoulder, and every other person in the room rises, chairs scraping slowly across stone. They do not arrest her. They simply escort her, not to her chamber, but to the old Eastern chapel, the one without a roof, abandoned after a lightning strike scorched its rafters 20 years ago. It still smells faintly of burnt wood and old wax. You pass under its crumbling arch with her now, surrounded by silent guards. She walks with grace, though the hem of her gown begins to drag through ash. And you realize this isn't an execution chamber. It's a stage. She steps onto the raised platform at the chapel's center. 4 stakes surround her, not touching, just watching. There's no audience yet, but they're coming. You can hear footsteps on gravel, hushed voices gathering like a tide. She turns once and looks behind her, not at them, at you, not in fear, but with something close to apology. You don't remember when the crowd arrived. One moment, it was just you and Charlotte beneath the crumbling arches of the old chapel, its stones blackened by time, its altar devoured by vines, and the next, you're surrounded. They say there were fewer than 40 witnesses that night, but it feels like hundreds. Faces line the edges of the ruin like frost across a window pane. Nobles, guards, servants, even children held quietly in their mother's arms. All of them summoned without announcement. All of them drawn by something they'll never name aloud. You try to meet their eyes, but they avoid yours. Everyone is pretending this is something else, a ceremony, perhaps. A closing ritual. Something wrapped in tradition, sealed with holy language and subtle cruelty. But your breath catches when you realize the firewood has already been stacked. Charlotte doesn't speak. She watches the preparations without interrupting. A priest recites scripture not from a book, but from memory too quickly, too flatly. His words float into the air like smoke without scent. And then the robes come off. They remove them respectfully, without haste. The red fabric is folded, not torn. A younger attendant, a girl who might once have served. Charlotte laces the undergown at the back, as if it has just another fitting. One pin gets caught in the hair at Charlotte's neck. The girl pauses. Her hands shake. Charlotte whispers something. You can't hear it, but the girl nods and weeps, then vanishes behind the curtain of bodies again. This isn't a public trial. That already happened, just in silence, behind closed doors, in the days leading up to tonight. This is only the execution of decision, and it's wrapped so tightly in ritual that the pain is buried beneath layers of ceremony, not erased, just muffled. Here's your historical fact. In the Savoyard tradition, condemned nobility were never sentenced aloud in public. The announcement was made through symbols, the removal of royal colors, the lighting of a ceremonial torch, and the breaking of a branch placed at their feet. You watch all 3 unfold in sequence now. First, her belt, embroidered with the Savoy crest, is taken away. No one speaks. Second, a boy no older than 12 walks forward with an unlit torch. It's passed, hand to hand, from noble to noble, until it reaches the bishop. He bows, lights it from the chapel's single lantern, and places it on a metal bracket just beside the pyre. The flame dances, waiting. Third, an old man in mourning black steps forward with a dry oak branch. Without meeting her gaze, he snaps it across his knee and drops the halves at her feet. And there it is. The sentence has been given. Charlotte stands still. Her face is unreadable now, carved from something older than grief. She isn't shackled, There are no chains, but the silence binds more tightly than iron could. Her hair has come loose in the breeze. It moves gently across her shoulder. The wind carries no birdsong, only the low rustle of watching breath. You notice something small, something strange. The relic necklace is gone. When? Who took it? You didn't see. This missing object becomes an invisible hole in the scene, and you can't stop thinking about it. Historians still argue about that necklace. Some say it was taken from her to strip her of all spiritual protection. Others claim she gave it away to a servant, perhaps, or a child, as a kind of final blessing. There's no record of where it went, only that it never surfaced again. The torch flares brighter now, and from behind the crowd, two figures emerge carrying an object draped in cloth. A chair. It's not what you expect. You thought perhaps a stake, or a pile of chains. But this is something quieter, heavier. They position it at the center of the chapel, between the four posts of the unlit pyre, and reveal its form. It's wooden, blackened by past use, but not splintered. Carved runes decorate its arms. Not decorative, functional. Designed for binding wrists in ways that discourage movement without shattering bone. Charlotte looks at it once, then sits. You see it then, the tiniest hitch in her breath. Not fear, not pain, but the realization that it's really happening, that the page cannot be turned back. Her hands are placed on the rests. Her ankles bound with thick cloth, not to protect her, but to ensure a certain stillness, dignity. The flames must rise in perfect symmetry. There is no speech, no declaration, no crime recited. But you know what they said behind closed doors. That she meddled, that she whispered to foreign agents, that she carried the late Duke's secrets and could not be trusted to keep them sealed. Perhaps the mere fact of her survival, her existence, threatened the new order being shaped in the court. The real reason will never be written. It's gone, lost in the echo of boots on stone and soft weeping behind gloved hands. A servant brings forward a small silver bowl. Inside, pitch. It glistens like tar in the firelight. One drop is placed on her collarbone, a second at her wrist. The symbolism is ancient 3 drops to anoint the condemned, to prepare the soul for the passage to judgment. But here it is cruel poetry, nothing more. Obscure detail. In some Savoy rituals, fire was seen not as punishment, but purification. And yet, no one here looks redeemed, only tired. You look up. It has begun to snow. Tiny flakes drifting through the broken roof, landing gently on her hair and the pyre below. Some hiss and vanish. Others cling for a moment longer. She does not shiver. The torch is lifted, not by a guard, but by the bishop. He steps forward with slow reverence, speaks a Latin phrase too old to translate, and touches the flame to the base of the pyre. It doesn't catch immediately. The wood has been stacked carefully, but the air is damp. The fire protests, then begins, a flicker, a crackle, and the silence tightens around you until even breath feels like betrayal. Charlotte does not cry out, not yet. She sits, she breathes. She closes her eyes as the first light reaches her feet. The first flames lick gently at the base of the platform. They move like dancers, graceful, reluctant, almost tender. You think, just for a heartbeat, that it might not happen, that the fire might falter, smothered by the weight of this moment, that perhaps God or fate or something older has changed its mind. But no, the dry wood underneath catches in a sudden breath, and the platform flares to life. Still, Charlotte does not move. Her eyes are closed now. Her face turns slightly toward the heavens, or what little remains of them, above this ruined chapel. Snow continues to fall through the broken roof, mixing with rising smoke. It's a strange image. Ash and frost, sorrow and silence, all suspended in the same dim air. The crowd watches. No one speaks. Even the children are hushed by something instinctive. ancient. You hear it, first in the wind, a low groan, almost like stone shifting. Then the sound of fabric beginning to crackle. The hem of her gown curls upward. The relics of her station laces, embroidery, royal threads curl and shrink into nothing. Still no scream. Instead, you remember something the nursemaid said once, long ago. Real queens don't beg. Not for life, not for mercy, not even for God. You didn't believe it then. You do now. Charlotte remains upright as long as she can. Her breath becomes shallow. Her posture slackens only slightly. The ropes binding her wrists are the last to burn. You wonder if she feels them vanish if, for the briefest second, she might have raised her arms skyward before the flame took everything else. One noble turns away. The bishop does not. It happens slowly, much more slowly than you'd think. Historical records often gloss over this, referring only to the moment of transition or the completion of justice. But the reality is not neat. The fire rises unevenly. Smoke obscures much of the body before the flames fully consume it. Some say this is a mercy. You're not sure. At some point, the air shifts. A new smell takes hold, sharper, more final. It clings to the stone, the fabric of your sleeves, the roots underfoot. It's the scent of a kingdom being rewritten. Here's your final historical fact. Her death was never publicly announced. In official records, Charlotte is listed simply as removed from courtly duties. Only one internal memo, written months later, refers to her passing under the veil of fire, a phrase equal parts euphemism and confession. Some say the fire refused to fully consume her, that a part of her, an arm, a relic, a shape remained among the ash. The guards cleared it quietly the next morning. No memorial, no tomb, but others whisper a stranger tale. They say the bishop returned that night alone, that he kneeled in the still warm chapel and retrieved something from beneath the ash. A thin chain, a pendant, unburnt, the relic. Historians still argue whether this is possible. Could such a thing survive untouched? Some claim, yes, that saintly objects resist flame. Others scoff, suggesting it was a copy, a tale spun to comfort the uneasy. But one thing is certain, the relic has never been seen since. Not in museum, nor church, nor collection. It vanished, like her name. The crowd disperses before dawn. Quietly, shamefully, the snow continues. It will bury the blackened stones in white before the next sunrise, softening everything into a forgettable silence. No one sings, no flags are lowered. And yet, something has ended. Not just a reign, not just a life, but a question. What does a crown mean when the fire does not care? You stay behind longer than the rest, watching, listening, for what you don't know. But as the wind moves through the chapel once more, you could swear, just for a moment, that you hear the faintest whisper. Not a cry, not a plea, just one word, still, and then nothing. The snow continues long after the last footsteps fade from the chapel floor. Thin flakes settle gently over charred stone, softening the outline of the platform where she sat. Even the ropes, those final tethers, are reduced now to threads woven into ash. Nothing remains to mark the moment, save for the echo of flame and memory. History does not always record its cruelties. Not cleanly. Some moments are scrubbed gently, worded in silence or buried beneath ceremonial titles that mean nothing without the bodies that wore them. Charlotte's name fades like smoke from the archives. Her death recast as a transfer of duty. Her crown perhaps melted down, or worse passed on, but the chapel remembers. Stone always does. And maybe you do, too. You picture her now, not burning, but walking slowly through the snow, still dressed in red, still unbent. Her breath fogs in the cold, her hand lingers on a pillar, and for the first time in weeks, she smiles not because she won, but because she endured long enough to choose silence over surrender. That's the strange thing about old punishments. They weren't always meant to kill. Sometimes they were meant to erase. And sometimes the ones who vanished left a shape behind a space where truth refuses to rot. So if you find yourself in a quiet chapel, someday where snow drifts through the roof, and something in the air tastes of soot, listen closely. You might hear the whisper of silk. You might find a single pendant buried in the dirt, or maybe nothing at all. And yet, you'll know she was here. She always was.